Never. I don't ever give up. I'd have to be dead or completely incapacitated. For my part, I will never give up, and I mean never. I think people can choose to be not ordinary. You know, they can choose to not necessarily conform to the conventions that were taught to them by their parents. So yes, I think it's possible for ordinary people to choose to be extraordinary. A source of strength, HM. That's really not how I think about things. For me, it's simply, this is something that is important to get done. And we should just keep doing it or die trying. I don't need a source of strength. Quitting is not in my nature, and I don't care about optimism or pessimism. F***CK that we're gonna get it. You guys are the magicians of the 21st century. Don't let anything hold you back. Imagination is the limit. Go out there and create some magic. Mars would just be the greatest adventure ever, and very exciting. And I think we need things in life that are exciting and inspiring. It can't just be about solving some awful problem. There have to be reasons to get up in the morning. Take risks now. Do something bold. You won't regret it. When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds aren't in your favor. When I was a little kid, I was really scared of the dark. But then I came to understand, okay, dark just means the absence of photons in the visible wavelength, 400 to 700 nanometers. Then I thought, well, it's really silly to be afraid of a lack of photons. Then I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore after that. I feel fear quite strongly. It's not as though I just have the absence of fear. I feel it quite strongly. But there are times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough, that you do it in spite of the fear. People shouldn't think, I feel fear about this, and therefore I shouldn't do it. It's normal to feel fear. There'd have to be something mentally wrong with you if you didn't feel fear. If you just accept the probabilities, then that diminishes fear. I think it's very difficult to start companies and quite painful. There's a friend of mine who's got a good phrase for doing a startup. It's like eating glass and staring into the abyss. If you're sort of wired to do it, then you should do it, but not otherwise. If you need inspiring words, don't do it. Well, I do think there's a good framework for thinking. It is physics. You know, the sort of first principles reasoning. What I mean by that is boil things down to their fundamental truths and reason up from there, as opposed to reasoning by analogy. Through most of our life, we get through life by reasoning by analogy, which essentially means copying what other people do with slight variations. And you have to do that. Otherwise, mentally, you wouldn't be able to get through the day. But when you want to do something new, you have to apply the physics approach. If somebody is doing something that is useful to the rest of society, I think that's a good thing. It doesn't have to change the world. If you make something that has high value to people, and frankly, even if it's a little game or, some improvement in photo sharing, if it has a small amount of good for a large number of people, I think that's fine. Having something that makes a big difference but affects a small to moderate number of people is great, as is something that makes an even smaller difference but affects a vast number of people. Stuff doesn't need to change the world to be good. I think most people can learn a lot more than they think they can. They sell themselves short without trying. One bit of advice: it is important to view knowledge as sort of a semantic tree. Make sure you understand the fundamental principles, that is, the trunk and big branches, before you get into the leaves, details, or there is nothing for them to hang on to. Somebody could say, and in fact people do, that battery packs are really expensive. And that's just the way they will always be, because that's the way they have been in the past. Well, no, that's pretty dumb, because if you applied that reasoning to anything new, then you wouldn't be able to ever get to that new thing. For batteries, they would say historically it has cost $600 per kilowatt hour, and so it's not going to be much better than that in the future. So first principles would be to say, what are the material constituents of the batteries? What is the spot market value of the material constituents? It's got cobalt, nickel, aluminum, carbon, some polymers for separation, and a steel can. So break that down on a material basis and say, if we bought that on the London Metal Exchange, what would each of those things cost? Oh geez, it's like $80 per kilowatt hour. So clearly you just need to think of clever ways to take those materials and combine them into the shape of a battery cell, and you can have batteries that are much, much cheaper than anyone realizes. It's very important to actively seek out and listen very carefully to negative feedback. This is something that people tend to avoid because it's painful, but I think this is a very common mistake, to not actively seek out and listen to negative feedback. When friends get a product, I say, look, don't tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. Because otherwise, your friend is not going to tell you what he doesn't like. You really need to sort of coax negative feedback. If somebody's your friend, or at least not your enemy, and they're giving you negative feedback, then they may be wrong, but it's coming from a good place. I think it's very important to have a feedback loop, where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. I think that's the single best piece of advice. Constantly think about how you could be doing things better and questioning